Welcome back to Spare Room Studio. My name's Jackie. I'm going to complete this page here. If you've watched part 1, I used gel crayons and got to a certain point with the gel crayons. Off camera, I've worked with them a bit further. It's later in the same day and some areas are still feeling a little bit tacky, but I'm going to see if I can work with Prismacolor pencils and show you how I will finish this off. So while I was colouring off camera, I've added some colours into different places. So this was all very much just a blue and white ribbon, and what I've done is I've added little bits of purple in here and little bits of this green from the dress here. That's the sister who's got Alice's head in her lap, so that's her dress. So I've used the green that I've used in the dress there to put into the ribbon there, just to brighten this ribbon up and give it a bit of life and a bit of interest. And I did something similar here with the pinafore. Although it's a white pinafore, I've put some pale pink and cream, a bit of lilac, you know, a little bit of green and so on, because that helps to draw your eye around the composition when there are little bits of colour from somewhere else, you know, in another part. So not enough to be too distracting, but enough to just help tie that composition together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish this off, or hopefully finish it off, and I'll just show you excuse me, how Prismacolors might be able to be used. Let's make sure that I'm all in frame here. How Prismacolors might be used. I've chosen Prismacolors when I've worked over the gel crayon before because they're a soft pencil, and the harder the pencil, the more it's just going to scrape the gel crayon off. So I'm just going to use a little bit of extra colour from coloured pencil to maybe just complete a few more details around the place, and maybe put a few details back in, but I don't want it to be highly detailed, or when I say details I just mean a little bit of definition, perhaps in places like this with the fingers where the grayscale is still showing through quite strongly. So I'm just going to, you know, tidy some of those sorts of bits up, try and make it look a little bit more sort of resolved, and, you know, just things like some of the details with the hair here are still rather rough, and there may be little bits of paper showing through that don't have a lot of pencil on them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that scrap bit of paper that I had earlier and just rest my hand on that while I'm colouring so that I don't smudge any of the gel crayon. So just little bits, again, rather slowly. Now's not the time to sort of go overboard and ruin all the hard work and undo all the nice effects that, you know, I've been able to get with the gel crayons, for example. So all I'm going to do is just sort of tidy some of these details up in the hair, maybe go over some of the grayscale that's still showing through. Where the gel crayon is very thin or very light layers, the grayscale showing through quite a bit. So I'm just going to do, you know, a little bit of that sort of detail sort of definition work and shadows. Sorry, it's increasingly difficult for me to talk and concentrate and colour at the same time, it seems. It can be easier sometimes to do a random chat, but sometimes when I'm deep in thought about what I'm doing, actually trying to find the right words to describe this to you in a meaningful way that's going to make sense and be useful and so on, can be incredibly tricky at times. I don't know that people realise, if they're not making videos themselves, just how tricky it can be at times. So I'm not sure how detailed I want to get with this. I'm looking at the photograph of Charles Santore's original painting off to the side still, and that's helping me to make a little bit of sense of what some of these details actually are. The drawing, if you remember rightly, was quite sketchy. The grayscale and the details was quite sort of sketchy, and which is a very nice style to have with the gel crayons. It certainly helps to stay looser in your style with the gel crayons and not get too detailed. But of course, not being the original artist, I still need to make sense of what some of it is so that I use the correct colours and so on. So I'm just using Chestnut PC 1081. It's quite a warm colour, and that's what I'm sort of doing all these details and shadowy areas in at the moment, because it's not so dark that it can't be altered or worked with, but it's definitely much more deeper and bold than some of the colours that I've got here in the skin and the hair. So you can use any old, scrap paper or paper towel or something just to rest your hand on so that you're not smudging things, and make sure that you lift it, you don't drag it and pull that gel crayon along with you, because at this point of your colouring, if you start to get big smudges that you can't fix, you'll be really cross with yourself. And I'm going to use a bit of a deeper pink. And this one's called Nectar, just to go over that grayscale. I find the grayscale's very useful, and in this particular book it's it's okay, but it can deaden colours, and it can make skin tones especially look a bit dead, a bit flat. So it's quite important to warm the grayscale up a little bit with some warmer colours. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier or not, but sometimes it requires picking a bolder, more vibrant colour to get over that greyness than what you might normally choose for your subject. So again, it's, you know, one of these things you need to sort of think about and play with a little bit, just to fully understand what the grayscale's doing and what works for you and your colouring style. So what you might see is sometimes when you're working over the gel crayon, the pencil will kick up some little pencil crumbs, or, you know, crayon crumbs. So don't smudge it with your hand. It's better if you can get a nice soft brush, a makeup brush or something like this, a fan brush. And doesn't have to be an expensive one, just a cheap one. And you can brush your bits off with a very soft brush, and that way you won't smear and have another, you know, potential problem that you have to fix up that you may not have been counting on. So I don't want to keep getting too much darker. I'm having a look at the reference photo just to give me ideas of just how deep the skin tone is on the original one. And I'm trying to keep conscious of the lights and the darks and the shading and so on, and try to work with that. Mine is not going to look exactly like the original version, of course, but I certainly want to pay attention to the shadows and the lights and the darks and so on, just to make sure that I get things in the right places. So you see over these areas where the gel crayon is not too thick, the pencil is actually working over it and starting to build up. You might want to bring some of that same colour into the hair, just for the continuity's sake again, to tie all these elements together. It helps to relay the information about the relationship of certain things with each other, that they are connected in some way. Not a physical connection perhaps, but it just helps the viewer's eye to make the connections. So that's how I go about adding the details in and finishing it off. I'm not really sure there's much else that I can really say or talk about. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments, and I'll do my best to come up with an answer for you. Please bear in mind that I am certainly not an expert in these. I have owned them for a few months now. I've worked on a few different pictures with them, but I certainly do not consider myself an expert in any way. I'm still pretty much, you know, feeling my own way through it all, and Basically just wanted to share with you how I'm teaching myself to do these things, and hopefully share with you, you know, don't be frightened of trying new things. It's okay. It's okay to, you know, potentially fail, because it's the only way we can keep learning, is to keep trying and keep exposing ourselves to new experiences. And when it comes to colouring or art styles, or, you know, art techniques, art mediums and so on, there really is only so much that somebody can tell you, and at some stage you really need to jump in and have a go for yourself. And especially if you already own them, if you've already got gel crayons that you're only using on backgrounds and nothing else, you know, seriously think about having a go with them. Now what I do is I have a tissue or a wipe or something. I'll wipe away that build up that you get off the gel crayon on the pencil sometimes. So I do wipe that off as well. But getting back to what I was saying, you know, if you've got them already and you're only doing backgrounds, you could have a, you know, potentially untapped new medium there that's waiting for you to discover it. And if you try it a few times and you give it a good go and you don't like it, then that's fine, that's okay. You know, but allow yourself time to play, and allow yourself to have a failure. I think I mentioned in part 1 that if you're going to try a new, you know, style or technique or medium out like a gel crayon, do it with a picture that you're not overly invested in to start with, that you're not going to be too disappointed if it doesn't turn out how you were expecting. You know, I've had a go with these in some other books before I decided to try this book. But I recently did a flip through video and I was talking about this book, I think. Can't remember how it came about, but I know that I suddenly thought, okay, well, water mediums are not great in this book because of the paper being so thin. So it had occurred to me that, you know, perhaps the big wide open areas would be okay with gel crayon, and even if I only did the backgrounds with it, you know, it would save me a lot of grief with the cockling and buckling of the paper that you get with water mediums and so on. So if I could get a big area covered quickly and not need water, you know, I thought that was worth a try. And thankfully it's working out and I'm quite happy with it, and I will do that with other books. I think now that I know that I can control this to a reasonable degree, things that have got big open spaces that will be, you know, a bit too painful to colour with just coloured pencil. I've got the option now of you know, reaching for these and giving these a go again. So this video will be a lot shorter than part one. I think I spent about an hour chatting while I worked in part one, and then I probably worked for about another hour or so off camera, because it was a bit quicker off camera when I didn't have to think about describing things and explaining things to you. It did go a little bit quicker. So it's been a couple of hours, and to do a page of this size in just a couple of hours, you know, is a good outcome, because if I attempted to do it with just purely coloured pencil on their own, it would take me far longer. Whilst it's not a race, sometimes I don't have the attention span to spend long periods of time, you know, colouring one page. I do like quick wins if I can get them. Let's just use a little bit of light aqua on this dress here in the background. Just tidying up any of these areas that I couldn't get into with the gel crayon. So if I had waited overnight and come back to this page, it would still potentially pick up some of this gel crayon on the pencil and need wiping off. But potentially not so much. You can see here, see how it's, maybe you can see how it's actually lifting the crayon off. That's really thick. It's scraping it back. But that in itself could potentially be a really handy technique if you want it to look very painterly. So see how it's putting a bit of texture in there. It starts to look a little bit like paint strokes. So that's the difference between working over areas that were thinner layers of gel crayon, plus they've had time to dry out a little bit, over working on very thick areas that hasn't dried. That's how it lifts the gel crayon back off. So that's good to show you that. Just trying to cover up those grayscale lines a little bit. And that's just got too much gel crayon on there. That's not doing anything with the pencil really. So I might have to wait for that to dry overnight and then come back to that area and apply some pencil to it. And then, you know, what I would do with this is actually sort of add it into some areas, not in a real harsh, obvious way, but just every now and again, here and there. And I find that it just, you know, brings a little bit of interest. It helps to get that eye to flow around the page more. And I'm not 100% sure what's going on in this little bit down here. I still haven't worked that out. I'll get a sort of bluish lilac. This is Blue Lake. And I'm just going to do that as a bit of a shadow colour down here. And a little bit under that collar there. So I'm not actually seeing that in Charles Santore's original painting. This is just my idea to put this colour around, but I'm happy with that. And then I want a little bit of a darker colour in the shadow for the yellow, so I'm thinking I almost need like a brassy gold colour. I don't know that I've got the right colour. Green ochre, let's try a little bit of that. And I'm just going to follow the lines of the grayscale, the shading that Charles Santore has put in there. So again, the artist gives us a lot of clues. You know, quite often, you know, his clues are there in what direction to do some of the shading and so on. And I'm just going over that grayscale with that colour now, just really to disguise some of the grayscale rather than being too obvious and adding like real details. Okay, how's that looking? So I'm just standing back and having a look at it, because I find that that's very useful to do every now and again to work out whether there's anything really glaringly obviously wrong. Okay, so I got interrupted and now it is the next day. I can't remember what I was saying on the last clip, but it doesn't really matter. It's kind of good that I got interrupted and I had a little break and come back, because it's given some of you to have be able to have a chance and watch part one of the video. And I've had some questions as a result of you watching that first video. So it's good because I can address that in the rest of this video. Now what I'm doing here is erasing, sorry, a bit of noise going on, so it just does not fail that when I start to record there will be some noisy truck or something will pull up or whatever. What I'm doing is just erasing any of the little smudges that have arisen from either being on my hand perhaps, or little crumbs of colour that have got smooshed in or whatever. You can see that the eraser is taking quite a bit off. Now this particular eraser is a battery operated one, so you can hear that, and it's a cheap one. It's cheap and nasty. It's not great, doesn't always work like it should. But the good thing about these little erasers are that you don't have to actually be using it with the battery. You can leave it like a manual eraser and erase with that smaller tip rather than a big bulky eraser. So there you go. I've taken off, hopefully you can see that little bit where I'd gone past the line up here. It's had overnight to dry properly and it's gone. So some of it will erase. Now just be conscious that some dark colours may stain the paper and some colours don't always erase well, which is why it's better to be cautious and just save this as a standby in case you need it. Now, some of the questions that I wanted to touch on. Chris mentioned that they have trouble with pain in their hands when using cotton buds. With arthritic hands and so on, it can be quite painful to work with small things that you have to grip tightly like this. It can put a lot of pressure and build pain in your hand. Excuse me. So I talked about paper stumps in my response to that question, or I believe the correct pronunciation is torsion, but it's pronounced, spelt Tortillon. I believe it's a French word, but they're known as paper stumps. And you can see that you can get all different sizes of these paper stumps. You can get some very, very small ones, which are, you know, great for getting into tight details and so on. But of course, you've got that problem again. It's a small thing to hold. So you get very small ones, and you also get these much larger. This one here says 12 millimeter, 10 millimeter, and so on. And these are basically very, very tightly rolled up paper. If you're not familiar with what they are, it's paper that is very, very, very tightly rolled to form a stump. And what you can do is most art stores, or a lot of art stores, will sell something like this with them. It's a little board with sheets of sandpaper. And I'll just move this aside. I don't really want to get anything too dirty on there. But if you get it dirty, you can rub it off like this onto the sandpaper and clean any colour that is on here off onto the sandpaper, and you get a nice clean surface to blend with again. And you can work it, you know, with a bit of practice, you can work it that you can keep that point. And this one is a lot bigger and chunkier to hold on in your hand, more like almost like the size of a marker. And then, like I did with the cotton bud, you would just blend your colours and so on, you know, with a, let's do it on the test sheet. Let me get a darker colour so you can see. So a decent amount of product onto there, and you can smear it and smudge it and push it into the paper with that paper stump. See how that colour is on there? Now, unless you've got a lot of them that you can have for different colours, you might not always want to be using blue. So once that's dry, you could work it off rubbing it onto that sandpaper. So that's one way. Just get rid of any crumbs. Now also, Chris was interested in how to use silicone tools. And I said you need to have a decent amount of product on your paper. If you've got a very fine, like this isn't very heavy and it's had a chance to dry, that's not moving at all now that it's had a chance to dry. A little bit there, but you know, it's not really working as a blender. But if you've got a background and you've got some nice heavy thick product on the paper like that, this one's a pointier one, this is a flatter one. But see how you can smear and push that around with the silicone as well. And you're not going to take it out in great big sweeping, although that is a little bit. Generally, you're sort of working and pushing it out to sort of the immediate vicinity. I hope that makes some sort of sense. But again, you're pushing it into the paper, you're blending it, smoothing it, and so on. So that's how that works, and you need to clean those off. because the next time you're going to use it, you're going to contaminate your colour. And then lastly, so you need to have a decent amount of heavy product. You can't just go like that lightly, and I'll show you the difference. So if we go to this one, it is smudging it a little bit, but it's not really doing very much. Okay, it's a bit sort of cumbersome and messy, and again, always have something to clean your stuff off on. But this, where it's thicker, see how you can kind of push it and manipulate it out. So if I don't think I've got a big marker here. So you need a decent amount of product on there. And if that was the line that you were colouring up to, you can push it up to the line and so on and blend it a little bit that way. It's probably easier to blend like a block colour rather than trying to blend two colours together with this sort of method. If you're trying to blend two colours together, I would probably go more with the paper stumps, because they're going to act a bit more like a cotton bud. So I'm not sure if this is going to show up all that well on the screen, but you can manipulate and push the product around a little bit with this flatter square tool as well. So if you didn't want to use your finger, you could do it that way. So Chris, I hope that gives you some sort of information, but you can see how much build-up I've got on there. So you definitely need to make sure you clean that off before you go using another colour with it. Okay, so that was one of the questions. Another of the questions was, does the gel crayon dry? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try, and it feels dry, but you can see there's still colour coming off on my hand here. Oops, where's the camera? So it feels dry to the touch. I'm getting in a mess here. It feels dry to the touch, but it is coming off. And if I was to have that page over here now and colour on here, that is going to transfer over to there. You do need to have a blotter page or something in between it. And I would suggest, if it's something that's very precious to you and you don't want to have any of that transfer over, I would still seal it with Satin Glazing Liquid. And I've got golden Satin Glazing Liquid here. It was Maia at Colour by Maia who first brought this to our notice in the colouring community, that this can be used to seal your oil pastels and gel crayons, those sorts of products. You can seal with the golden Satin Glazing Liquid, and once that has been sealed, it won't move. So I'm just cleaning my hand off, and I'm going to grab another book to show you. Got bits and pieces everywhere. You should see my table. It is just craziness. So let me just get all of that off my hands because I don't want to transfer it to anything else. So in this particular book here, I used combination of gel crayons in the background there, some oil pastels and so on. And this has been sealed with Satin Glazing Liquid. There's nothing. So that's not going to transfer because nothing's coming off of there. And this one I'm still working on, hence the paper is in here. But I have sealed some of this and then worked over it with pencil, and there's a little bit coming off from the pencil that's over the top of the Satin Glazing Liquid. But this here was all oil pastels and gel crayon and stuff, and nothing's coming off of there now. So my advice would be that whilst you can leave this as it is now, and there will be minimal transfer over here, there is still a risk if things are rubbing and being agitated that something's going to come off of here. And I don't think it would smudge as such, but I wouldn't want to risk it if it was something that was precious to me. So I will be using this when I'm completely finished. So the page that I did on the weekend just gone, this hasn't been sealed yet either. I haven't used this on there yet. It feels dry to the touch. Let's have a look. But see, it's still, I'm rubbing it pretty hard, but it's still coming off. There hasn't been any transfer onto that page, but I haven't been too rough with the book either, so the page has only been getting gently closed over. So I think there is potential that that could transfer over to that, and I'd hate to tell you, no, it's not going to, and it does. So my advice would be to think about fixing it or sealing it. Now, I haven't really tried it yet, but just bear with me again. Where did I put it? Now, I haven't tried this, so you might need to do some tests of your own, but you can get workable fixative, and this does say clear permanent protection for pastel, charcoal, chalk and pencil work. This is an old can, so don't look for this particular can. It may have been rebranded, but this one I think is Micador. Yes, but it's old, so the branding may have changed. But a workable fixative means that you can spray your work and fix it, but you will be able to add more product to the top. If you get a permanent fixative, you're not guaranteed that you're going to be able to work over the top of it. So if you think that you're going to want to keep putting more stuff on your page, look for workable. And I usually choose matte because I find anything with a gloss means that there are some things that will no longer work over the top of it. So I generally would go for a workable fixative in a matte finish. So this is an aerosol. You need to do it outside and have good ventilation because it can be really bad on the respiratory system. So use that with caution. What else can I say? Yes, it dries. It dries to a point where you can be touching it lightly. Very, very lightly. There's no transfer. Rubbing it, yes, it does still transfer. also it will depend on how much product you've got on there. So if you've used light layers, it's less likely to do that, but the areas where I had thicker colour, yes, it's more likely to do that rubbing off. So just to complete this now and finish up, just bear with me while I move a few things. I'm pretty happy with the way things look. There's really not too much else that I would do to this other than perhaps, again, I've still got some areas where the grayscale and line work is showing through. I don't mind too much that that's still there because it looks like a pencil line. It's not heavy black or anything like that. But if you don't like that sort of thing, you may want to keep working and building it up to a point where those lines, you know, the original drawing is no longer showing through. But because it's very sketchy in nature, I like that. And there are little tiny crumbs coming up, which is a combination of some of the dried gel crayon. It's also partly pencil crumbs from the Prismacolor itself. But I'm hoping that you can see how that Prismacolor is working over the top of that quite nicely. So once you allow this to dry and all that oily, sort of slippery sensation of the gel crayons is gone, you can come in with your coloured pencils and so on and keep working over the top of it to a certain extent. I think I've mentioned it and I'm repeating myself, but I'll say it again just to be on the safe side. If you do seal this with Satin Glazing Liquid, you will be able to put some pencil over the top of that as well. So over the top of Satin Glazing Liquid, I find that pencil layers pretty well over the top of that as well. So I think I'm at a point here where I would, you know, potentially be giving up pretty soon. I've got a black here. I may just put, you know, some little tiny bits of black into the areas where I need the highest definition or a bit of shadow or something like that, just to give it that extra boldness. But I like the fact that this particular drawing isn't heavily detailed and it's a little bit more loose in nature, the way that it has been drawn, that I don't feel like I need any really sharp, you know, tight detail in here. I'm quite happy with the way it looks. You know, it suits the story and so on, and I think that the effect of the gel crayon over the top of that grayscale is very subtle and very nice. And I do think that in this particular instance that the grayscale is an advantage because it's giving some definition to the items on the page without too much shading. Just a layer of one colour, like over here on the dress, you know, is enough to get away with if you're not a confident colourist using blending, you know, on all of your pictures. So again, at the risk of starting to fiddle, but just wanted to show you that where those areas are completely dry now, the pencil's working very easily, not too much effort required with that. And you can just start to put a few strokes in here and there, you know, maybe to describe a few things, but hopefully not go too overboard. going to lift that up to the camera for you. And apologies again for my breathing. I'm really clogged up today and not feeling the greatest today, so hopefully you can see there how those few little strokes of black have helped to define some areas without, you know, being too overpowering. And I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not going to fiddle too much more with it. I think that that is perfectly adequate as it is. I'm happy with the little touches of purple and, you know, bringing those colours around the composition a little bit more. And that's it. So thank you again for joining me. With these extra bits in, it's probably stretched out a bit longer than I was hoping, but I appreciate you taking the time to be with me. Again, just to show you, Chris or anybody else who's interested, that these are known as paper stumps. This is a Montmartre brand, which is quite cheap, but you can usually pick them up in art and craft stores, and no doubt they'll be available online. And that's just a little block with some sandpaper on. If you can't get hold of those, just a sheet of sandpaper will be adequate and do the same job. And just to show you these tools, that one's sort of like a chisel nib, and this one is a fan brush. These are Derwent brand, but you can get whatever is, you know, available to you. And that one is a bit more of a pointier nib. Where I've been using it, it's going out of shape. And that's that little fan brush that I use to brush away any sort of pencil crumbs or dust or dirt. Okay, so I hope that I've addressed most things there for you. Again, if there are any more questions about the gel crayons or what you've seen me do in this two-part series of colouring, do let me know in the comments section. And if you know of anybody that is interested in gel crayons and could get some use from this video, please do share it so that people do find me, and hopefully it can help somebody else to get started with gel crayons. I know there's been quite a few of you who say that, you know, you're not confident to do a whole picture with them. Hopefully this does give you some confidence to get started and to see that they are capable of doing more than just a flat background. So there you go. Until the next time, take care, and hopefully I will see you again soon.